Hi everybody, in this video we will be discussing about the core concepts of Python. I have prepared a Jupyter notebook which I'll be sharing in GitHub and providing the link in the description box. You can download the notebook, save it in a particular location. Either you can open it in your own machines if you have already installed Anaconda or Jupyter notebooks. Otherwise you can open it in Colab also. I will just tell how you can open it in Colab. Just go to Google. For opening in Colab you should have a Google account, that's all. Gmail account, every one of us have it. So you can click on this Colaboratory by Google. There will be an option to create notebook. Don't go for that, just give a cancel and come to file and go to the option upload notebook, browse and go to the location where the notebook is saved and open it. You can start working on the notebook using Colaboratory. Even though Python is not installed in your machine or Jupyter is not installed in your machine, that is not at all a problem. You can directly start working like this. Basically there will be two types of cells in a Jupyter notebook. One is code cell, another one is text cell. Code cells are going to help us to run the code. For Python it is very straightforward. Google supports us. It has got all the packages installed. Even for data science you can directly work on Colab without installing any additional packages. They are already installed. This is the major advantage. And text cells are going to provide some concepts. Whenever we want to communicate some concepts, we will have text cells and we will add relevant concepts. So I am going to run in my local machine because I am going to use a particular tool called as Rise, which will help me to do a kind of projection. This will help us to show a particular cell in a bigger size, particularly when we are doing presentations or when we are recording some videos. This will help us. I have installed the Rise tool and I am going to go to presentation type of mode. Let me go to the first cell of this particular notebook and start the presentation. So first thing what I am going to talk about is why should we learn Python, why it is so popular. When we see the important advantages of Python, it has got a simple syntax and the programs are very clear and easy to read, and companies and organizations like YouTube, Google, Yahoo, NASA, everywhere Python is used. Of course, recently Google has developed its own language Go, and most of its softwares have started developing in Go. But when you look at a few years back, Google has widely used Python also. So Python is having such a powerful thing. And when you look at the history of Python, it was created by Guido van Rossmann in the early 1990s itself. He did it as a hobby because he was working in C. He felt C has got a lot of syntax and it is difficult for certain people to remember all the syntax in C. He felt there should be some language which is having lesser syntax. That was the objective when he made this language, and he made it like a fun. In his Christmas holidays in December, he made this language. And when you look at the name Python, all of us will get the snake in our mind, but the author did not have the name of the snake in his mind when he named it. Rather, he gave the name of a most favorite circus television show of him, that is Monty Python's Flying Circus. That was his favorite television show. Based on that, he just named the language. And you may think why Python is so popular and why so many people are talking about Python. The reason is it has got a lot of packages for almost all the applications that are being built. For all the people, all the kind of people, there are packages. When we look at mathematics or mathematicians who are working on it, we have got math package which is by default coming. Apart from that, there is NumPy, SciPy, stats models. These packages also help us to do matrix operations and then linear algebra. All those things are already built in. So it's very easy to work with Python. If you consider web development, you have got Django framework as well as Flask framework. And if you are a person who is interested in OS and networking, there are many packages like OS, NetMiko, NCC client and so on. For database connectivity also, for every kind of backend, either SQL or SQLite or PostgreSQL, we have got lot of packages. Machine learning is very hot today. Many applications are based on machine learning. When you look at it, Pandas is there, and SciPy, Scikit-learn, these are all the packages which help us to do machine learning. And similarly, deep learning is a one step ahead of machine learning. For that also we have got lot of packages like TensorFlow, Keras, PyTorch, Theano, and so on. Visualization is very important because a picture is more descriptive than 1,000 words, isn't it? So if you want to picturize some data, if you want to observe some pattern in it, there are a lot of packages like Matplotlib, Seaborn, ggplot, and so on. And for text processing also, text is the wide way of communication. When you look at text processing, there is NLTK toolkit we have got, and Gensim is there, Polyglot, and we have got TextBlob, Core NLP. These are all the packages. And IoT has become more popular, and we have got packages like MRArray. And image processing, we have got OpenCV, Pillow, Scikit-Image. And graphics is very important because it makes the application to be more interesting for everyone. When you look at how we can do graphics in Python, we have got tkinter, and we have got Turtle. Speech, this is a very popular way of communication. We have got PyAudio, and for video processing also we have got lot of packages. Since we have got packages for all the kind of people, all the kind of research, the Python language has become more popular, right? So we are now going to discuss, since it is very popular, we have to know the core concepts that are available. What is the purpose of having a machine? When you look at it, we have got a computer, or people have interested in building a computer to assist the human. Instead of we doing the work, we want some machine to do the work. That is the basic objective of building a machine. So when you look at how do we do human, it's going to replace a human. When you do a job, when you do a task, we follow some sequence of steps. That's what is called as an algorithm. Algorithm is not a mathematical or a computer science term, rather it is a term in everyday life that we follow. For example, when you want to get ready and go to the college, right? So you will be following algorithm. If you have to get into a bus by 7:15 morning, then you may have a plan like you have to wake up by 5:30 and you have to do your morning stuff, and then you have to take bath, and then you have to have your breakfast by 7:10, and you have to step out of the home and reach the bus stop. Like you have a sequence of steps that you will be following. That is a basic idea of a algorithm, right? And we can think reaching a college as a problem, right? And when we are working with these algorithms, there are three components in it. One is sequential. In sequential, basically order is important. As I was telling, first you will get up, you will take bath, you will have your breakfast, and then go to the college. If these are all the steps, the order is very important. I cannot say take bath after reaching the college, isn't it? So that order is important. So the sequential order we have to maintain. That is one part of the algorithm. And other part is selectional. When you have got some conditions, right? And based on the condition, if you are going to do either one way or other way. For example, when you have to reach the college, if you are getting ready earlier, if you will go by bus, college bus. If you are getting ready before 7 o'clock, then you can go to the bus stop and catch the bus. Otherwise, you may have to take your two-wheeler or something. So in that case, a selectional statement will come. If you get ready before 7:15, then you will go to the bus stop, get into the bus, reach the college. Otherwise, you will take the two-wheeler and reach the college. So that kind of selectional and Boolean expression checking. For that, we need some kind of statements that is also present in Python. And then is iterative. We may have to repeat a set of statements in some cases. For example, when you want to do a reading in a book, right? Complete concept, if you have to finish, you have in a syllabus, then what you will do? You will take a concept, you will read it, and you have to do the book back exercise. And then next concept you will take, you will read the chapter, you have to do the book back exercise. Like this, you'll be repeating the same set of statements to complete the entire book and have a complete knowledge. So when you have to repeat certain things, then we have to go for iterative set of statements. And when you look at the features of Python, basically Python is an interpreted language. We need a language translation because we humans have a kind of language which we can understand, either English or Tamil or Hindi, whatever it is. But these machines are basically electronic devices which can understand only zeros and ones. So they have to be converted. Whatever statements we are giving, they should be converted into a machine understandable language. So there are two types of translators that are present when you consider programming language. Either compilers can be there or interpreters can be there. If you consider C, C++, those languages has compilers, but Python is an interpreted language. What is the difference basically is, an interpreted language, the conversion will happen line by line. And if there is an error or a mistake in a particular line, then the interpreter will not proceed until we correct it. For example, if there is a mistake, if there is a syntactic error in the 5th line, then the interpreter will not proceed at all. It will wait for us to make the correction. Whereas a compiler will just make assumptions and then it will give all the errors together. It will also process the 6th, 7th and so on, though there may be a mistake in the 5th line. This may be compared to a real-time example I will tell. A Japanese Prime Minister is coming to India. He is delivering some lecture. We do not know Japanese language. So we will be having a translator in between who will be converting each and every line of his speech to the language what we know, right? That is interpretation. Whereas if you consider a news reporter who is listening to the same talk by the Japanese Prime Minister, he will not change line by line. Instead, he will do a compilation and bring it as a news article in the next day. Right? That's the basic difference between a compiler and an interpreter. And if you consider the popular IDEs, integrated development environments, for Python we have got PyCharm and then we have got Spider, and these are all very helpful IDEs which will be giving some colors for the keywords, and they have also got some debugging options and so on. And if you consider Python, there are two modes of execution that makes Python much easier to learn. One thing is interactive mode, other one is script mode. In interactive mode, it will be possible for us to just give the instructions and see the output. This is PyCharm where we have got the console mode. This is interactive. For example, I can just tell 2 plus 3. It will give me 5. And I can just tell print hello. Print is the command to print something in Python. If I tell print hello, we will see that it is printing. It is very easy to just check few syntaxes in the console mode, and it is not required to write a complete program. How I have used console mode is basically, if I have forgotten some syntax, I will just go to the console mode and I will try it and I will try to recall. After I recall, I will embed in the program. Even though I may write a code which is for 50 lines or 60 lines, if I have forgotten the syntax, I will not take the risk of trying out in the entire code of lines 50 or 60, because I may have to read some input like 10 input and 20 input. After that only that particular line will get executed. Then I will be in trouble. I have to unnecessarily type the input, isn't it? So what I will do is I will make sure that the syntax is correct by going to the console mode and checking it. This is one major advantage of having this console mode. In script mode, we'll be creating a file with extension .py and we'll be writing the code. And then the next feature, important feature of Python is it is a dynamically typed language and it did not require any kind of declaration like other languages where you have to declare a variable as an integer or float or string. Here it is not required, and Python will consider the data type based on the data at that particular point of time. So it is called as a dynamic type language. So for example, you can see here I have given A. I have given A as an integer here, and after certain lines I can tell A equal to a string. How do we represent string in Python? Is using either single quotes or double quotes. If we tell, Python will accept it, will agree it. So till this line A will be integer. After we give it as a string in line number 5, A will become a string. So the data type of the variable will be decided based on the type of data that is being stored at that particular point of time. So only we say Python is a dynamically typed language. It is case sensitive. Capital A is different from small a, and so on. And it is a strictly type checking language. What is meant by strictly type checking is, let me show in the console mode. As we can see, 2 plus 3 is 5. That's fine. It will work with integers and floating point values and so on. Similarly, I can give strings. I can give 2 strings and I can put a plus operator in between. I will see that it is getting concatenated. But I cannot use a string and a integer. I will get an error, right? So it will also check the data types correctly. So it's called a strictly type checking language. And next we are going to see how identifiers are in Python. Basically, identifiers are like what we have as names for people in this world. How do I am getting identified? By my name. Similarly, when you consider the elements of the program, let it be a variable name or a function name or a class name, they are called as identifiers. So the rules for identifiers in Python is, the identifiers can be sequence of one or more characters of a program element. And identifiers can contain letters or digit, but it should not begin with a digit. And a special character or underscore can be used as a the only special character that is used in identifier is underscore, right? So what is given here is, I can tell name, right? Name is a valid identifier. I can tell name equal to 2. This is valid. And I can have name 1 equal to 3. This is also valid. It can also have digits, right? Name underscore 1, right, equal to 5. This is also valid. The only allowed special character is underscore. I cannot have something like ampersand or something like dollar and so on. I will get error. So the special character allowed is underscore, and it cannot start with a digit. I cannot tell one name equal to 4. I will get error because it starts with a digit. Those are the rules of the identifiers. Next important thing, if you consider any programming language, is comments, because we will forget what we have written as a code, right? Even though you may be the programmer who wrote the code, you may not be able to remember everything. So every language provides comments. The purpose of comments is to give some statements which is for the human, right, which is for the programmer, or who is going to, another human who is going to see the program, and we give information to the compiler or the interpreter that do not process this, right? For that we have got, in all the languages we will have single line comments as well as multi-line comments. In Python, single line comments are used with hash, right? And multi-line comments, you can either use triple single quotes or triple double quotes. So this is single line comment. You can see, since this line itself starts with hash, this entire line becomes a comment. And single line comment can also be partial. Actually here the comment starts only from here, right? So the interpreter will process till this. It will tell a equal to 123, and but it will not process what is given after hash. So we can run this code and see. So 4 variables are created. This is also a string, this is also a string. The point that we should remember here is, in Python both single quotes and double quotes are used for strings, right? There is no character data type in Python as other languages have it. A character is considered as a string of length 1 in Python. And when you see the data type of C, you can see what is the data type of a variable by using the type function. If you see the type of C, it is a string. So you're getting us str. If I tell type of A, right, what is type of A? A is a int, and if you tell type of B, B is a float because it had decimal points, so it is treated as float. This is integer. So when we see the data types in Python, the data types supported by Python are Boolean values or native data type of Python. So a Boolean variable can take a value of true or false, and none is also a data type in Python. The usage is emptiness. When you have a variable which does not hold anything, then we can use none. And numbers, there are different type of numbers like integers, floating point numbers, complex numbers are supported by Python, fractional numbers are supported, and so on. We can have also strings, and there are also when we look at the above data types, they are very primitive, do not have very big functionalities, but we have got like data structures also as data types in Python. When you consider tuples or list or dictionary sets, these are all data structures which has got a lot of functionalities, but they are also data types in Python because it is completely implemented and we can easily use for our problem solving. And when you see the different type of numbers, as I told, we have got integers, floating point numbers, complex numbers, and fractional numbers. So how do we represent a complex number? Generally in mathematics, we will have I as the suffix for imaginary part. A complex number has two parts, real part and imaginary part. And how do we indicate the imaginary part is using a I. But in Python, we will be using J. So how we will be telling us a general form is A plus Bj, where A is the real part and B is the imaginary part. And you can create complex numbers by either passing one argument for complex, right? I can tell complex x. Then x will be treated as the real part and its imaginary part will be treated as 0. Or I can just tell complex of x comma y. If I tell like this, x will be the real part and y will be the imaginary part. So I will just show it in the console. I can show like complex. I will tell a equal to a equal to complex of 2, right? If I tell like this, if you print a, you will see that its imaginary part is 0. And I can tell b equal to complex of 2 comma 3, then 2 will be taken as the real part and 3 will be the imaginary part. So you will see like 2 plus 3j. That's what is done. And you can also assign like this, c1 equal to, you can tell like this, 2 plus 4j. We can also tell like this, right? So here there are two complex numbers. c1 is 2 plus 3j and c2 is 4 plus 7j. If you want to know the real part of a complex number, then you have to give just c1 dot real, and to know the imaginary part, we have to use dot imag. Here we are printing the imaginary part of c2. One point that I have to tell now is, we can just print in Jupyter Notebooks. It is possible to print a variable just giving its variable name alone. What I try to tell here is, telling print of c2 dot imag, right? I didn't define it. This is the problem with Jupyter Notebooks. 1 minute. I have to run the cells, otherwise the runtime will not know the variable. So now I can tell print c2 dot imag. This is equivalent to just telling c2 dot imag. If you are printing one variable in a cell, automatically if you give the name alone or what you want alone, it will print. But if you want to print more than one value, then you have to explicitly give print statement. Otherwise this is fine. And when I'm going to add two complex numbers, it is very easy. Python is providing just plus. As we do in mathematics, we can easily tell C1 plus C2. When I add two complex numbers, I will get another one complex number, isn't it? And it will get automatically executed. Since a value is returned, you can see that Jupyter Notebook will print it, right? But if you hold it in a variable, it will not print it. Suppose if I tell C3 equal to this, then it will not print unless I ask the system to print it. But if you are just telling C1 plus C2, since a value is getting returned, automatically Jupyter will print it. You can do subtraction, you can do multiplication, and even division, right? Next, what we are going to discuss is how to read the input from the console. A very basic thing. When you want a job to be done by the computer, you have to give some input for the task. How it will read. For that, we have got an input function, right? So the input function will read the value from the user, but it will read it as a string, right? Let me show it. First equal to input, right? When you tell like this, it is waiting for the user to enter the value. The user is entering it. It is taken. And if you check the data type of first, we have already seen that Python is a dynamically typed language. So based on the value what is being stored in first, its data type will be printed. You can notice that it is printing as str. Why? Because we have used the input function. It will read, but it will read it as a string. If you want to convert it into integer or float, then we have to explicitly do it. See, here you can tell int of input. And one more thing is, you can give a optional argument for input. If you give an optional argument, that will be the interactive message that comes when we wait for the input. Now I am running the code. First, you can see that the text whichever is inside this input is getting printed and it is waiting for the number. As soon as I enter the number, this input function will take it as a string, but we are using here the int function. So the string will be converted to an integer, and first will be pointing to an integer object. Next, you can see the interactive message for the next input is getting printed, waiting for us. We are entering, it is treated as string, converted to integer. So second is pointing to an integer object. When we tell sum of numbers, you see that first plus second, you will see 5. Suppose, for example, let me try this. I am going to remove the int from these two statements. Let me run the code again. What will happen now? First is reading the value. It is storing it as a string object. And second is also reading the value and storing it as a string object. When it will first plus second, concatenation will happen. Plus in Python, plus is supported between string objects also. You can see that concatenation happens and you get 2 followed by 3, right? So the correct thing is you should convert it into integer if you want to really work with numbers. And if you want to have decimal parts, then convert it into float, right? So what are the type of operators that are supported? Arithmetic operators, bitwise operators, comparison operators, logical operators. Like all other languages, all the type of operators are present. And we have seen in mathematics itself. For example, if I have got an expression like 2 plus 3 into 5, which operator should be done first? 3 into 5, right? Why? Because mathematics tells that we have to follow Bodmer's rule, which tells that brackets of division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Similarly, in programming languages also, when we have got an expression, to evaluate it, the language tells the precedence of the operators. Precedence. So this is an example precedence chart of Python, where we see that these operators have the same level of precedence. This is power, exponentiate, right? This is having the highest precedence, and then you have unary positive, unary negative, negation, and so on. And then you have got this multiplication, division, this is integer division, modulus, and so on. and then addition, subtraction, we have got this order. This is the highest precedence. These are all the operators having lowest precedence. The point to be noted here is, it is not like Bodemar's rule, where in Bodemar's rule we have got a clear concrete idea. This operator should be applied before that. But here in precedence chart we have got a group of operators. Those operators have the same level of precedence. There may be a conflict if I tell 2 into 3 by 5. 2 star 3 by 5. If I tell like that, what I try to tell is 2 star 3 slash 5. Which one should be executed first, right? When you see the precedence chart, both of them have the same order of precedence. There comes associativity. To resolve the conflict, we have to use associativity. When we tell associativity of the operators, either it can be left to right or right to left. Okay, so most of the arithmetic operators have left to right, and definitely these operators have left to right. So first of all, multiplication will be done, followed by division. Yeah, so these are all the arithmetic operators. We know addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. This is integer division. So what is true division and integer division is, if I tell 5 single slash 2, this is true division, I will get quotient which is 2.5. If I tell 5 double slash 2, this is integer division, I will get the quotient as 2. The decimal part will not come into this. And another one operator related to division is modulus. So when we tell 5 modulus 2, you will get remainder. Okay, 5 mod 2 will be equal to 1. That's what these operators, and then you can have compound assignment and compound multiplication and so on. So when we tell 2 plus 3, actually addition will happen and you will see the answer as 5, right? And similarly 3 minus 1 will be 2, and as we discussed, 5 slash 2, this is true division. So you see the answer is 2.5. Whereas if I tell 5 double slash 2, that is integer division, decimal part will not be coming, so you see 2, and 5 mod 2, the remainder will come and it is 1. And you can do compound assignment also. Here we are telling A equal to 5, B equal to 2, A mod equal to B. So what does it mean? A equal to A mod B, right? So remainder, when we divide 5 by 2, when we execute, we will get it as 1. And if you see the bitwise operators, see what are bitwise operators? As we discussed earlier, the computer, the system, it's a electronic device which can store the data and which can understand only zeros and ones basically. So these bitwise operators are going to work in the binary level. The native language of a computer is basically a binary representation of data, or instructions also in the binary representation. So these bitwise operators are going to work in binary representation of the data, so they will be faster also, of course, because when we speak in our native language, in our mother tongue, we feel very comfortable, we understand easily. Similarly, the system also will process the bitwise operators much faster than other operators like arithmetic operators and so on. So when you look at the operators, we have got left shift operator, first one. How we will use left shift is two less than symbols. Here we tell left shift for once, right? One time. This is how many times it should be shifted. And when you look at the property of left shift, what will happen is, let me just tell the binary representation of 4. Binary representation of 4 is 1 0 0. So when we tell left shift, what will happen is, this 1 will go one position left, this 0 will come here, this 0 will come here. There is an empty space, this empty space will also be filled by 0. This is the binary representation of 8. Okay. And if you left shift twice, then what will happen? If I tell left shift twice, this will move 2 spaces. So 1 will come here and this 0 will come here, this 0 will come here. 2 empty spaces. All empty spaces will be replaced only by zeros. This will be 16, right? So the basic idea or the concept that will be involved is when we left shift an integer n by m bits, it is equivalent to multiplying n by 2 power m. This is the observation that you will get. Similarly, right shift, how we will do right shift is 2 times greater than symbol. This is going to tell how many times we do the right shift. This is telling once we are doing a right shift. When we do right shift once, actually it is equivalent to doing integer division by 2. If you do right shift twice, it is equivalent to doing integer division by 2 power 2, right? So when we right shift a number n by m times, it is equivalent to doing integer division of n by 2 power m. And this is bitwise AND. How does bitwise AND work is, for example, we have given 4 is 0 1 0 0 and 2 is 0 0 1 0. When we do bitwise AND, since AND from the name itself you can understand, if both the bits are 1, then the resultant bit will be 1, otherwise it will be 0. So this is 0, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0. So the answer what we will get is only 0. And bitwise OR is either one of the bit is 1, then the output bit will be 1. So 0 0 will be 0, 0 1 is 1, 1 0 is 1, 0 0 is 0. So this is 6. This is decimal value 6. So you will see when you do bitwise OR between two numbers, you will get 6. And this is exclusive OR. How does the exclusive OR work is, if both the bits are same, then you will get 0. Okay, how does bitwise OR works is, if both the bits are same, then we will get 0. So 0 exclusive OR 0 is 0, 1 exclusive OR 1 is also 0. We want both of them to be different, exclusive, that's what. But if you tell 0 XOR 1, this will be 1, 1 XOR 0 will also be 1. And when we do exclusive OR between 4 and 2, what we will get, you are doing exclusive OR, this will be 0, 1, 1, 0. So this is also 6. That's what we will observe when we do this. And negation. Negation can be done using the still symbol, basically a complement, right? So zeros will become ones and ones will become zeros, but internally machine is doing 2's complement. It does not go in depth to it. Since it follows 2's complement, it will add 1 to the value after we complement and we will get the value, right? That we can see it separately. And the comparison operators that were present are, you have to check equality. How you will check equality is, you have to use two equal to symbols, and checking inequality is not equal to symbol, greater than, less than, greater than equal to, less than equal to. These are all the comparison operators. See, equality true, 2 is equal to 2 and 2 not equal to 3 is true. They return boolean values. 2 greater than 3 is false and 2 greater than equal to 2 is true. And next what we are going to discuss is about conditional statements. As we discussed, when you have to check some conditions, right, we have to go for conditional statements. We have got if, we have got else, and we have got else plus if, that is elif. In Python we will call it as elif. So let us take an example and easily understand. And moreover, in Python we have got logical operators also, which I didn't tell in depth. The logical operators present are and, or, and not. These are all the logical operators. When we will be using these logical operators is when you want to connect the conditions, then we will be using these logical operators. Now let us see an example. In this example, we are going to read the mark of a student and we are going to print the relevant grade for the student. So read the marks, convert it into integer, and then you are checking whether the mark is valid. The mark is valid only if it is greater than 0 and less than 100. So you check if marks is less than 0 or mark is greater than 100. Then you are going to print invalid elif. What is elif? Elif means the system will understand that the previous, when this will be getting executed is if the previous if failed. Okay, if this failed, then this condition will be checked. If this is succeeded, then this will not be checked. Okay, so if this line is getting executed, if it succeeds, we understand that mark is from 90 to 100. Okay, and we will print as grade. Okay, and you can see that indentation is the way to say the part of the code that should be executed. We do not have any kind of braces or anything as we have in other languages. In Python, a block of code is represented by indentation only. When this condition is satisfied, we have to execute this block of statements. So they are intended inwards. And you see here elif. So if this condition is checked, what can be understood is all the above if has failed. It means that the mark is less than 90. Okay, if it is now greater than or equal to 80, then we can understand the range of markers from 80 to 90. In that case, we can print A and so on. This is ladder if basically. Why do we call ladder if is? Because they are connected. This if fails, then this if is executed. If these two fails, then only this will be executed and so on. Yeah. So when we run this code, we can see, suppose if I give us 75, you will see it as B, right? And you can have more than one statement in the block also, as it is shown here. Only thing is they should be properly intended. Next, how iterative statements are supported in Python. If you see, in Python, two type of loops are present. One is for loop, another one is while loop. And the working of for loop, how it can be seen is, just imagine, for example, if I have to run around pole, right, 10 times. How I can do it? One idea is I can just have a counter in the mind and I can increment it. Other one is I will maintain a basket of 10 balls. I will take a basket of 10 balls. After I finish one round, I can throw one ball outside and so on. When I have to stop, then when the basket becomes empty, then we can stop running, right? This is the idea which is used in for loop of Python. In Python, we have got a sequence generator called as range. Okay, so this sequence generator actually takes 3 arguments. First one is the starting value of the sequence. Next one is the stop value of the sequence. And the third one is optional. That is a step value of the sequence. So what will happen is this range will generate the sequence. So it is like a basket of numbers. It's like a basket of numbers. In each iteration, we'll be taking a value till the basket becomes empty. That's the rough idea how a for loop works in Python. So let us look at this code, a very simple code for I in range 0, 10. So this range will generate a sequence starting from 0 and it will go up to 9. Actually, this is a stop value. This sequence generator will generate numbers while the generated value is less than the stop value, right? If it is less than the stop value, then it will be put inside the sequence, right? So from 0 to 9, and I have not given the third argument. If I have not given the third argument, then Python will consider that as 1. So the step value is 1. So the first value is 0, second one is 1, 2 and so on, right? And you also have to note one more thing. Here I have given end equal to space. There is one empty space. Why I have given this is, by default print statement in Python will take the control to the next statement, next line. Actually, I do not want to move to the next line. I want to print all the numbers on the same line. Then I have to use this end as the argument, where I am telling just give end equal to space. Okay, and by default this end is new line character. Here the same for, but look at the range. We are starting from 0. Stop value is 10, but I have given the step as 2. So the first value generated will be 0. Next one will be 0 plus 2. Next will be 2 plus 2 and so on. Next is about while loop. How a while loop in Python will work is, it is like in most of the other languages where you'll be having a loop controlling variable. The loop controlling variable has to be initialized before starting the loop, and then you will have a terminating condition based on the loop controlling variable. And one more thing is, in the body of the loop we should change the loop controlling variable's value. Otherwise the loop will go on an infinite loop. So now we will write a code for generating or printing numbers from 0 to 9, right? I is the loop controlling variable here. We have initialized I to 0 and we are telling while I is less than 10, okay? We are going to print the value of I and tell end equal to space. Increment the value of I within the body of the loop so that the loop does not go on an infinite loop. So when you run this also, you will see that it is printing from 0 to 9. Two important things when you talk about loop is break and continue. The purpose of break is to come out of the loop. Okay, so if we put break inside a loop, it will come out of the loop, whereas continue means it will skip the rest of the statements in the body of the loop and continue the loop. It will go to the condition, or it will go to the for or while statement for continuing the loop. Let us try a code. In this code, what we are going to do is, we are going to accept only numbers that are divisible by 5. And you will stop when the user enters -1. You are not going to stop till the user enters -1, and you will accept in the sense you are going to print the number only if it is divisible by 5, and otherwise you are going to just read the numbers and so on. Since the condition is like when the user enters -1 only, I am going to stop. I am writing in this way. I tell while true. When I tell like this is an infinite loop. This will not terminate by itself. This will terminate only if the programmer is giving a break. Okay, so I am reading the number, and in the next line I am checking if the number is -1, and I will break the loop if it is -1. Otherwise I will go to the next statement where I will be checking whether the number is divisible by 5. If the number is divisible by 5, right, then I will be printing the number, right? And actually this meaning is, when I tell num mod 5, num mod 5 will be 0 if the number is divisible by 5. 0 is false in Python, right? So I can simply tell num mod 5 to indicate num mod 5 not equal to 0. Both are same. Now let me run the code. It is waiting for me to enter the number. Let me enter the number 12. When I enter the number 12, num is 12. Okay, num mod 5 is 2. 2 is not equal to 0. So in that case it will continue. Continue means it will go to the while loop, and there the condition is true. So it will come to the next statement, and where you are reading number. Now it is 15. Num is 15. It is not -1. This condition also not satisfied. So this statement will be executed. It will print the number. Now I am telling 13. It will not execute number because here we have given a continue. Continue means it will go to the beginning of the loop, skipping the rest of the body of the loop. This is also part of the body of the loop, but this is being skipped if the number is not divisible by 5. That will happen, right? And if I give -1, the loop will break and it will stop the execution. And next what we are going to discuss is about a very unique feature of Python which is not present in most of the languages. That is a else for loops. We know that there will be else for if condition is satisfied or not satisfied. But in the case of loops in Python, it is giving else. When this else part of loop will be executed is when the loop did not break. So when you come out of the loop, there are two ways in which you can come out of the loop. One is a normal exit, or a break has been encountered. I can map this to a real-time scenario, like some factory, in a factory, generally people work from 9 to 5 o'clock, right? So they enter the factory by 9 o'clock and they come out by 5 o'clock. And if there is some emergency, siren is heard, then they have to come out of the factory. Okay, and you tell that you have to take the thumb impression of the employees on normal exit only. That is, if they come out by 5 o'clock, then only they have to give the thumb impression, right? If it is on emergency, we are not going to follow the protocol and all, isn't it? Immediately there will be exit. So if the people are coming out, there are two ways in which they may come out, right? That condition depends. Similarly here also, when the loop is terminating, it may be a normal exit like 5 o'clock is reached, or it may be break like some siren is heard, right? So to distinguish that, this else part is being given by the language. The else part will be executed only if it is a normal exit. The break was not encountered, right? So to understand this, we can write a code to check whether a given number is prime or not, right? So for example, if you consider number 7, this is prime, number 19, this is prime, number 25, it's not prime, it's a composite number. How do we generally judge? For small numbers we can just check like this, but for example, if I tell 1,17,334, okay, easily you can tell 33, whether this is prime or not. I cannot just look at it and immediately come to a conclusion. Then I may have to go, I have to check whether there are factors from 2. When you will say a number is prime, if it is prime, then it is divisible by 1 and the number itself only. There are no other factors. Okay, that's what we mean. So you have to check from 2, whether 2 will divide this number, otherwise 3 will divide this number, 4 will divide this number, like this you have to check. How far we have to check. Okay. So when you look at it, there is a very not popularly noticed property of composite numbers. Composite numbers are opposite to prime numbers, right? Composite numbers have factors other than itself and 1. That's what is called as a composite number. So when you look at composite number, there is a very unpopular property of composite number which tells that its smallest factor, composite number n, if you consider its smallest factor, will be less than or equal to square root of n. This is a important property. Okay, we are going to use this to avoid unnecessary checking, right? So I am going to use a math package. So I have imported math sqrt, right? You can tell like this, from math import sqrt. So you are importing only the sqrt function from the math package. You are reading the number from the user and you are finding out the maximum value. How do you do that? You use the square root function, and square root function will return a float value, but range will expect us to give an integer value. So let us convert it into integer by using int function, and then we are running the loop from 2 to max factor. We check if the number I divides num. If it divides, then we can understand that it is a factor, I is a factor. In that situation, you can immediately print no and break the loop, right? To make a conclusion that a number is composite, you have to just know one of its factor. For example, if I am telling the same number as 1,17,334, immediately you can tell a conclusion that this is a composite number because it ends with a even number, so it must be definitely divisible by 2, right? We will not bother about whether it is divisible by 3 or 4, no. As soon as we see a factor, we can tell it is composite. So we can break the loop, right? And this else part, this is the else for. To understand whether this is else for if or for, just see the indentation. This is the else for. Here I will tell s. What do I mean by this is, if the else part of the for is getting executed, I can understand that I didn't break the loop. If I didn't break the loop, I understand that I didn't meet a factor. That's what is observed. And next is about strings in Python. Already we have seen how string constants are represented either using single quotes or double quotes. We can represent string constants, and many operators are present in strings, which makes strings to be more interesting. This is single quotes representation of string, right? And one more property that is not to be understood is they are immutable. What is meant by immutable is you cannot change a character of a string. I cannot tell. Actually, each and every character is having index starting from 0. In Apple, A is at index 0. I cannot tell S of 0 equal to B. You cannot change S like that, right? And but you can change as a whole, that we will see later. There are few operators which can work with strings. Plus for concatenation, already we have seen about it. Interesting is star, that we will see next. And then in is there and so on. Before that, let us see indexing in Python for the strings. Forward indexing and reverse indexing or backward indexing. What is meant by forward indexing is, if you consider a string, it will start the indexing from 0. The first character will be having the index as 0 and it will go up to n. Actually here there are 17 characters. So the index starts from 0 and goes up to 16. This is forward indexing. And we have one more indexing also, that is called as backward indexing or reverse indexing, where the last character will be having -1 and it will go in the reverse direction, -1, -2 and so on up to -17. This is what is called as backward indexing. When we refer to character in a string, we can either use forward indexing or reverse indexing, right? So this is concatenation. You can see S1 plus S2 or S2 plus S1 here. Just S2 is followed by S1. And this is very interesting, where you can use star, right, between an integer and a string. If I tell S1 star 4 times it will get repeated. Or I can tell even 4 star S1. It will also, okay, S1 is not defined. Let me define S1. Yeah. So this will also work, either a number before or after. And indexing, as we know, A is having the index as 0. This is the fourth character, PPL. So L will be the fourth character. And next important thing is about slicing. So what is meant by slicing is, it is like a cake slice. When you want to cut a cake, you need 2 points to cut it, similar to that, right? So index is from 0 to 4 for Apple. If I tell 1:4, right? Let me tell this is S. S is Apple. If I tell S0:4, I mean I want the characters from 0 to 3. This is stop. Stop index will not be included, okay? And if I tell S1:4, I mean I need the characters from 1 to 3. So it will take PPL, right? So let us see that. If I am not giving this is optional, okay, right? If I give 1 to 4, I say I am getting PPL. If I tell 1:4:2, okay, 1:4:2 means I will take the first character, that is character at index 1, that is P, and I will add 2 to this. So character at index 3 will be taken, that is L, and then when you add 2 more, you will get 5. 5 is greater than stop, so that will not be included, right? So you will have only PL. You can see this. And the start and the end is also optional. Start index and the stop index is also very optional. If you don't give it, it will consider from the start to the stop. And it is also possible to give negative steps. When you give negative steps, it will go in the reverse direction. If you want to give negative steps, then your start index should be greater than the stop index. Then only it can happen, obviously. And this is the easier way to reverse a string. You just give ::-1, you will see that the string is getting reversed. And this in operator will help us to know whether a string is part of another string. For example, I can check whether AP is in Apple. Yeah, it is present, right? I can also check PL it's present, PL is present, LE is present, like that. And if I am checking PA, right, it is not present. P is not followed by A. So in operator will work in that fashion to check whether a string is a substring of another string. And there are a number of string functions that are present. When we look at it, a lot of string functions are present, which will help us to make our job very easy. Len function returns number of characters, and sorted function will sort the characters. Count will return how many times a particular substring occurs in a string. Find will return the index, and so on. Strip is there to remove the spaces. Trailing and the leading spaces will be removed by strip function. We have R strip to do only on right side, L strip to do only on the left side, and so on. And begins with function will help us to check whether a string begins with something, whether if it is fully alphabet. We can check by using is alpha. Minimum will give the minimum character, smallest character. Maximum will give the largest character, and so on. So many functions are there. They are broadly classified into global functions and string functions. What I mean by global function is, if you look at len function, it's a global function. Why do I tell like that is, let us consider a string apple, right? I tell len of s. I will pass the string as a object, right? So it is a global function. Whereas if I tell s dot is alpha, it is a string function. This function will check whether S is made up of only alphabets. When we tell a string, it is made up of characters. The characters can be either alphabets or digits or special characters, and so on. If I tell for S, now S is apple. So it is made up of only alphabets. It is reading true. Just look at the usage. I am telling S dot is alpha. So it is a string function. I am calling through the string, and I do not pass string as an argument. Then we call this as a string function. And let me tell apple 1, right? Now if I use the same is alpha, I will get false, because other than alphabets I have digits also, I will get false. So a number of functions like this are present, which makes us to do coding very interesting and easy in Python. So this is just showing len, and you can use sorted. And when you are sorting it, by default it will do only in ascending order. If you want in descending order, then you have to give one more argument, reverse equal to true. And you can count how many times a particular substring occurs. For example, if I simply tell S1, let me also add one more line here, S1 equal to apple. So if I tell S1 dot count of P, P is occurring 2 times. And if I tell PP, it is occurring only once. So it is going to tell how many times it occurs. And I can tell PA, it doesn't occur at all, so it will give 0, and so on. And we have got this enumerate function. This enumerate function will be helpful when you want to take index of a character and the character at the same time. We can see, I am going to read a string from the user, and I am giving here index comma val in enumerate. So the index will come here and value will go there. So let me tell ball. So index 0 B, value will be B, and index 1 A. So when you want to take both at the same time, then we can use this enumerate function of Python. And next we are going to discuss about the data structures that are as data types in Python. Okay, list, tuples, dictionaries, sets. These are all data structures which are having a lot of functionalities. They are not very primitive data types like what we discussed till now, but they are completely implemented in Python and provides us the facility to use like a normal data type itself. When you look at a list, it is mutable. So what is meant by mutable is you can change the elements of the list. That's what is meant by mutables. And how it is represented is when you put something within square brackets, automatically it is considered as a list. And tuples are similar to list, but they will be enclosed within parentheses, and they are immutable structures. You cannot change the elements of the tuples. And dictionaries, when you look at it, they are mutable, they can be changed, and they are represented within curly braces. And when you look at each element, it will be a key value pair. When we see, we will see more details about it. And sets are also mutable, they can be changed, and they are also enclosed in curly braces. So first we will talk about list. List is a collection of heterogeneous type of elements. They can be changed, and you can have also nested list for representing high dimension of data. And when you look at the operators, they are similar to strings. You can use plus for concatenating two lists. You can use star for repetition, in for checking whether an element is present in the list, and for indexing square brackets, for slicing square bracket and colon, the same thing. And we have got a lot of functions also for list, like append function is there, and then you have got insert function. Append will add an element to the end of the list. Insert will add an element at a given position. Len is there to return the number of elements. Sorted is there to sort the elements. We have got global function as well as a built-in function. Why? Because list is mutable, can be changed. So we can call the sort as a part of the list also. We have got count function, index function is there, and you can delete an element, and you can map a function for a list of elements, and you can find minimum element, and you can add a list to another list, right, using the extend function. Pop is for taking an element, last element from the list, and reverse for reversing it, and for finding the sum of the elements we have got the sum function. And this is an example of list. When we put something within square brackets, then it's going to be a list. When you tell append, it will be added to the end. You can note that first we had only 10, 20, 30. We have got here 40 also. And when you tell insert, at the position 2, you are inserting 15. This is at index 0, 1. This is at 2, right? So inserting 15 there. And then to find the number of elements, we use the len function. And sorted will return a new list. It will not modify the list which is passed as parameter. It will return a new list in which the elements are sorted. You can notice here, sorted of L comma reverse equal to true. You want it in descending order. So you see elements are from 40 to 10. And when you print L, it is not changed. But when if you call the sort, built-in sort, that is for the list, now I tell L dot sort. See the difference in the usage. Here we have passed L as a parameter, but here we call sort through the list L. And when we tell reverse equal to true, the list by itself is getting changed, and this will not return anything. So only you see the return value is printed as none, but the list by itself is getting changed. And if you want to delete an element, then you can tell del of L of 2. So the third element in the list is removed. And you can map. The use of map is you can apply a function for a list of elements. Here what we are doing is we are applying the square root function for the list of elements. So it will find square root of each and every element, and we are converting it into a list, because the value returned by the object returned by a map function will be a map object. So we are converting it to a list. And you can find the smallest element by using min, and max is also there to find the largest element, and extend to add a list to an existing list, pop to remove the last element from the list, reverse for reversing the list, and then reverse. This is a global function. As we had sort, we have also got reverse, right? Reversed is also there, for which we have to explicitly pass the list as the argument. Next important thing in Python, interesting thing in Python is about list comprehensions. When we can go for list comprehensions is if we have already got a sequence which is existing and you want to create a list from the existing sequence, then we can go for list comprehensions. It will be a shorter way to do it. For example, if we have got a list L with 4 elements 1, 2, 3, 5. Now I want to create a list L1 which will have square of the elements in L. In that case, I can write a list comprehension for doing it. I am telling L1 equal to x square, right? For x in L, if you tell like this, what will happen? It will take one by one the value in L. X will be first 1, 2 and so on. It will find out what is 1 square and put it inside L1. 1. 2 square and put it in L1, that is 4. 3 square is 9, 5 square is 25 and so on. And you can also use the zip method. Zip method is a very interesting method which will work like a zip in our bag. When we pull the zip in our bag, what happens? The corresponding teeth of either side of the bag gets connected. Similarly, when we apply zip between two lists, the corresponding elements will be paired. So you will see here 1 and 2 will be paired, 2 and 4 will be paired, 3 and 5, 4 and 6. So when we write for x comma y and zip, x will be 1, y will be 2 for the first time. For the next time, x will be 2, y will be 4 and so on. When you add it, you will get the sum of the elements. Next is tuples. As we saw, it's a immutable sequence. Other than that, it is very much similar to list. How do we represent an empty tuple as? By parenthesis. But there is one exception that we have to remember regarding tuple as, because parenthesis is part of an expression also. If you are not having a comma in the parenthesis, then Python will think as an expression and evaluate it. So if there is only one element in the tuple, then you have to put a comma. That's the difference. So 1 comma is going to indicate this is a tuple. If I am not using this comma, I can show it. If I type, it will become an integer because it will evaluate and do. If I put a comma, then it will be a tuple. So one more observation that we have to remember is, even though we are not going to put any kind of braces, simply if I separate some elements by comma, then that also will become a tuple. If I have got t equal to 2, 3, 4, it is a tuple of size 3. That's how Python is going to treat. And concatenation is through plus, and for repetition star, and indexing is possible. To know the first element, we will give 0, and slicing is also possible, right? This is the start value, stop value. Here I have not given step. You can also give step. There is no difference. And you can use the sorted function. You cannot use dot sort because it's an immutable structure. But global function can be used. If you sort it, it will arrange the elements in ascending order, return a list. You have to observe that it is returning a list, not a tuple. And you can convert a list to tuple just by giving tuple of L. It's very simple. And also you can use the tuple to form a list. We can use this tuple as the input for the list comprehension. I am telling here x plus 2 for x and t. So each element from t will be taken and 2 will be added into the new list. So you see that 14, 17, 10 and 25. And this is count can be used for knowing how many times it has occurred, and you can have nested tuples. That is, element can also be a list or a tuple and so on. And I cannot change it because immutable. Once again, you cannot change the element of the tuple. But if I am having a list, you can see that in T at index 1 we have got a list. I can change the list like this, T of 1 of 0. What I try to do is I am changing the first element of the list inside the tuple. This is possible. And you can also just print, right? This is just printing. This is showing that it is mixed type, heterogeneous type is possible. You cannot remove an element. I cannot simply tell delete a particular element, but I can delete the entire object itself. I can simply tell del tup. This is possible. Let us try out this. This is defined. See, you are telling del tup, and after deleting you are trying to print, you will see that you will get a error, right? Because we have already deleted it. And you can find maximum element, minimum element. And one more thing is unpacking will happen in Python. here there are two variables A and B, and you are having a list with two elements. If I assign like this, what will happen is unpacking will happen, and one will be assigned to A and two will be assigned to B. Similarly for a tuple also, if I have got a tuple with two elements and I am assigning to two variables, the corresponding elements will be assigned to the variables. And as we have seen, comma separated values are tuples. If you print the type of the T, you will see it as a tuple, right? And the interesting thing in Python, how do you swap two numbers in Python? It's very simple. You can simply tell A comma B equal to B comma A. But a lot of concept is involved here. Whatever we discussed here is involved, but just for time being, see, it is a wonderful thing, very easy thing that you can swap two numbers like this. Next, what we are going to discuss is about dictionaries. When dictionaries will be helpful is when you want to do some kind of mapping between two entities. For example, I want to know how many number of days, maximum number of days are there in the month. Consider a non-leap year. January contains 31 days, February contains 28 days, March contains 31 days, and so on. So if I want to map between the month name and the maximum number of days, then I can go for a dictionary, right? And when you see dictionary, it's going to be a pair of key and a value, and is separated by a colon. And how do we refer to element is by the key. Key is unique and immutable. One more thing that we can just map here is, for example, in a class, you will have students' registration numbers and their names. And when you look at it, registration number will be used for referring to the person because it will be unique. Whereas name, there can be repetitions, isn't it? And you want to map to the registration number and name, then you have to go for a dictionary. It's like that. Okay. So key is going to refer to the particular person. So it should be unique and it should be immutable. These properties should be there. But values, when you look at it, there can be duplicates. It can also be immutable. Like names can be duplicates. Okay. And so on. So how do we represent an empty dictionary? You will just put a pair of curly braces for empty dictionary, and here we are seeing the dictionary with the month name and the maximum number of days. Suppose if you want to know how many number of days are there in November, then we will tell num days of November. So this is how we will refer to an element in the dictionary. Through the key we have to refer. Within the square brackets, we have to give the key. It will return the value. And one more thing is, suppose if you want to take the month names, right? I can simply tell, I'll just do that and show. I can insert one cell and I'll be telling num days dot keys. So if you just tell num days of November, right? It gives the number of days. If I tell num days of keys dot keys, it will return the keys that are present in the dictionary, like January, February, and so on. And when you look at the data type, it's going to be dict keys. If you want to do some list operations and all, then you can simply convert it into a list. It is very simple. To convert the data type, you can just tell list of num key, num days key, and if I want to sort it, I can simply tell it. And after that, if I print num days, okay, I can store it. Otherwise, I will simply store it in L, and then I will tell L. Oh God, I should not say sort here, better here. Right. List of num underscore days. Yeah, if I print L now, I can see it in sorted order. So if you want to use some built-in functions of list and so on, take the keys and convert them. And similarly, you can take the values also. You can take the values just by using values function, and you can convert it into list or so on. And items, when you tell items, both key and value will come. So you can unpack it by just telling n comma d. N will contain the key and d will contain the value and so on. And you can change the value like this. For example, if I want to change to leap year, I will tell num days of February equal to 29. And I can print the entire dictionary and verify it. Suppose if you want to remove a value from it, because it's mutable structure dictionaries, you can change it. Suppose if you want to remove the December month, it's possible. You can tell del of num days of December, and you can print and see. Clear is a function which will remove all the elements from the dictionary. So the dictionary object will be existing, but it will be empty. After this, if you print num days, you will see it as an empty dictionary. And del is, it will remove the object itself. When I tell del num of days, the entire object will be removed. If I try to print num days, after that I will get an error because the object itself is gone. Now we will do some small kind of task using this list. How we can build a dictionary from a list. For example, if we have got a list of fruits, these are all fruit names, unique names. Now I am going to build a dictionary with the starting letter as the key and the name of the fruit as the value. I can do it. For that I am having, initially I am having a empty dictionary f underscore dict, and then I am writing for f in fruits. Fruits is the list. What I am doing, I am taking the first character, I am making it as the key, and I am telling equal to value. I can simply tell like this to create a fruit dictionary. After that, if you print and see, you see that it is printing A apple, B berry, M mangoes, O orange, and so on. And then you can also use it for some interesting tasks like number names, for printing number names. You can just build a dictionary with number as the key and value as the string, number names. Then I can print it. I can just traverse through the dictionary and I can print also. I'm just taking the numbers from 1 to 5 and I'm printing their values. And you can have the value as a list also. For example, now we are going to do a task where we have got a list of numbers and we have got a list of factors. Now we have to form a dictionary with the factors as the key and value as list of values, right? For example, if you consider here in this list, 2 has 20 and 34 as the multiples, or I can tell that 2 is the factor of 20 and 34 and 5 is the factor of 15, 35, 40 and so on, right? So I am going to build such kind of thing. I can do like that also. In that case, I will be having an empty dictionary and then I will be writing a code in which the value will be a list, and for the first time when we insert, we have to insert a list with only one element. After that, we will be appending the list. So finally, you will be getting a list like this. That is 2 has its multiples as 20, 34. And for 3 we have got 15, 45, for 4 we have got 20, for 5 we have got these numbers. Like this will be getting. And you can pop, if you tell pop of a particular key, that value will be printed. Difference between del and pop is del will just remove it, pop will return the value also. And next is about the another one interesting data structure, that is sets. So how sets will work is, that is just like the set theory what we learnt in our high school. there will be operations like union, intersection, and so on. Now let us consider an example. There are two students who have got their timetable. They have got their slots, right? There are few slots chosen by the students. Now if you want to know the common slots, or if you want to know the slots together taken by the students or difference, then we can use this set theory, right? These sets for doing it. And when you see the properties of set, basically they are list without duplicates, and it's an unordered collection. It's mutable, but its members can only be immutable, right? And we are going to use curly braces. Already we have used curly braces for dictionaries. How it is differentiated? It is basically differentiated because we have already seen dictionaries will have a key and a value pair, and they will be separated by a colon. But in a set, it will be a simple element only. But that conflict comes for emptiness, because empty dictionary is also empty curly brace. So we cannot use empty curly brace for empty set. Rather, we can create a empty set by using this way only, like S1 equal to set. If you type of S1, then you will see that it is a set. Whereas if I am going to use curly braces, you can see that I will see it's a dictionary. So let me consider two sets like this, just A1, B1, C1, C1, D1, E1. If you want to print the slots chosen by either S1 or S2, in that case you have to do union. How union can be done is, either you can use this OR operator, or you can use the built-in function union. Also S1 dot union of S2 also we can use. The difference is the difference between these two is, I cannot use a list with this operator. For example, if I have got S3, it will expect both the arguments to be as a set. I cannot simply use a list. I have to, if I use like this, I will get an error. Let us just execute and see. I will get this error, but if I convert it explicitly to, because S3 is a list, if I convert it into list, set, I will get it. But in the case of union, it will take either a set or a list. Even if a list is given as an argument, it will implicitly convert it into a set and do union operation. That's the basic difference, nothing else. And if you want to know slots chosen by S1 but not by S2, S1 minus S2 will help us. This is just the set theory what we have learnt in school, and equivalent to it is difference. As we have seen, difference will be more tolerable, right? Having more tolerance. And symmetric difference is S1 minus S2 union S2 minus S1. We can do that. And if you want to print all the slots taken by both S1 and S2, then we have to take intersection. For intersection, we will use this AND symbol, right? And you can add an element into a set by using add function, and then you can remove an element using pop. Pop will return basically also. And this is how set operations. More details are also there, but this much is enough for working with sets. And next important thing what we are going to discuss is how the assignment operator in Python works, and that is called a shallow copying basically. Let us consider a list for that. Elements of the list are 1, 4, 7. If I am telling L1 equal to L, right, what will basically happen is, let me go to the board. First we had a list, right, where we have got 3 elements 1, 4, 7. Now I tell now I tell L1 equal to L. So what will happen is, L1 will also point to the same memory. If you print L and L1, you will see it is one 1047. Now I tell L1 of 0 equal to 10. So this 1 will be removed and it will be replaced by 10. So what will happen? If I print L1, I will get 1047. If I print L also, I will get 1047 only, because a shallow copying is only happening when we tell L1 equal to L. Both of them are pointing to the same memory location only, right? This will not be always correct. We may need a separate copy of memory in certain situations. In that case, we have to use the copy method, right? Instead of telling that L1 equal to L, we have to tell L1 equal to L dot copy. This will, what will happen to this is, this will create a separate memory with the elements. If I had a list L with 1, 4, 7, telling L1 equal to L dot copy will create a separate memory and put the elements in this place. And if I change now L1, now I am changing L1 to 20. You see L1 has changed, but L will remain the same, right? And next important thing is, in any language, modular programming is very important, right? You cannot develop a code, a bigger problem we cannot solve as a single code itself. You need definitely modules or functions, right? The objective of having modules is you will have a clear idea about the solution that you are developing, and you will be concentrating on a particular functionality during development, and you can also check whether the functionality is properly implemented by using unit testing and so on. And when you are going to integrate smaller modules, you can solve bigger modules also, and easy to check for mistakes and easy to make changes. These are all the advantages of modular programming. And functions in Python is also there. How do we write functions in Python is, we will be using this def keyword for defining a function. And there are basically 3 types of parameters supported by Python: positional, default and keyword parameters. And one more amazing property of Python is, Python can return multiple values. Now let us take a simple example of finding simple interest. We know that 3 arguments has to be passed. One is the principal amount, another one is the number of years for which we deposit, third one is the rate of interest. So we just tell return PNR by 100. The simple formula is used for this function. When we call this function with positional argument, I will pass 1000, 510. Then by position the values will be assigned. P will be assigned. P is the first argument. Okay. So P will be assigned 1000, N will be assigned 5 and R will be assigned 10. This is what is positional arguments, right? Next is about default arguments. When we will go for default argument is, in most of the cases, if the rate of interest is 10 and during festival time only, the rate of interest will change. Then why should we give the burden on the user to always pass the third argument? You can make it as a default argument. How we will make it as a default argument is, you have to tell R equal to 10, right? This is how we will make it as a default argument. So when the user is going to call this function, either he can pass 3 arguments or he can pass 2 arguments also, right? Let us see this. He can call 1000, 5. He is passing only 2 arguments. So the third argument will be considered as 10. The same function can also be called with 3 arguments also. I tell 1000, 5, 6. In this case, the third argument will be taken as 6, not as 10. The default value will be overwritten. Certain properties that we have to remember while we are working with default arguments is, default arguments can only be trailing arguments. What I mean by trailing arguments is, this is perfectly allowed, right? But I cannot tell P is equal to 1000. It will not allow me. See here, non-default argument follows default arguments. More than one default argument can be there. For example, I can tell n equal to 1. This is allowed, right? Even all the 3 can be made as default arguments. But a default argument should not be followed by non-default arguments. They can be only trailing arguments, right? And next is about keyword arguments. Let us just recall the function what we wrote just before. The simple interest function, which will take the 3 values P and R. While calling, I can tell the name of the arguments. If I am telling the name of the arguments like r equal to 6, n equal to 5 and so on, the order is not important. It will just give the value of 6 for r, okay, and n for 5 and p for 1000 for p and so on. You may not really appreciate this if you are just looking Python and its keyword arguments for the first time, but you will really appreciate it if you are going to work with the packages of Python or in projects where we will be having some meaningful names for the arguments. You will remember the name of the argument, but you may not remember the order. In that case, these keyword arguments will really help us. And the recent IDE is also, when we start typing itself, is going to pop up with some tooltips which will guide us to fill the variable names, right, argument names. And order is not going to be bothered with this. This will be really helpful when we are working with packages. And in Python, one thing that we have to understand is everything is an object in Python, right? So when I want to create or initialize certain objects, I can use the corresponding classes defined by Python. For integers, there is int, float and str, complex, vital. I will say that int will be, a will be 0, float will be 0.0, str will be empty string, complex will be 0. If I print and see, you can see int is 0, float is 0.0 and string is empty string, and complex is 0 plus 0j, but it is printing as 0j. And every object is having a unique identifier in Python, and you can also see the identifier by using the id function. So when I tell id of a, I will get the unique identifier, and id of b. For every variable we can see the identifiers, right? So as a whole, Python is a wonderful language which has got much easiness when we are going to code it, and a lot of packages will also help us to do a easy coding in Python. Thank you.